What's up, everybody, wherever you may be listening? No matter where you are on your journey, I'm glad that you are here with me and that I get to be here with you. So, being hard on yourself, it's actually unholy and unproductive. It's unholy and it's unproductive for three super important reasons. Number one, being hard on yourself, especially to excess, it is a blinding action. So when you're too hard on yourself, it's usually due to a hyper focus on one or two persisting actions. And when you become hyper focused on anything, when you become singularly focused on anything, it prevents you from seeing anything beyond that and seeing anything else that's actually impacting your life for better or for worse. I had this friend of mine that I grew up with, and he became singularly focused and extremely hard on himself for cussing. Whenever he would use the F word, the intense physical and emotional repentance that he would go through would be unlike anything else I'd ever seen. And his hyper focus on that and his hyper focus on the intention of no longer saying a cuss word prevented him from seeing that he actually had much worse and more difficult things happening in his life. For example, he smoked weed daily and it was sucking the life out of him. It was literally sucking the energy and the motivation out of his life. But he was so singularly focused, so hyper focused on this one thing that, yeah, it would have been better if he freely used his language and used his language to build up people and used appropriate language. Yes, that would be good. But in the order of things, it would have been way better for his life for him to have stopped smoking weed and continued to cuss than the other way around. And this is maybe an exaggerated example, but the same thing happens for you or me. When we are hyper focused on a singular fault, it prevents us from seeing anything else. And in fact, the evil one will often encourage us to hyper focus on a singular sin to sneak some other things in through the door and to allow some other things to grow and become really big without us noticing it. So number one, being hard on yourself, especially to excess, is a blinding action. Number two, self-anger and tolerating self-anger, it can actually foster pride. We often look at being hard on ourselves as something that decreases pride, but it can often increase pride. So you're a human being. You struggle with habitual faults because that's what it means to be a human being. For better or worse, under the banner of original sin, we will struggle with habitual faults. We will do things we don't want to do over and over and over again. You're a human being. You're not above that. You're going to confess the same thing lots of times throughout your life. To think otherwise, to believe that you ought to be above that, to believe that you are somehow made of a certain amount of material or stuff that is different and above other people, that you won't struggle with anything consistently over a period of time, is to fall into a prideful view of your own humanity. Don't marvel at the reality that you keep falling in the same way. Don't harp on the fact that you keep falling on the same way. Don't do it at least with an expectation that this shouldn't be the case. I can't tell you how many people I talk to on a regular basis who are like, man, I should be over this already. Man, I shouldn't be struggling with this anymore. I should be over this. And they spend so much time in judgment of themselves and the reality of a habitual fault that A, they don't really make any progress on overcoming the habitual fault. And B, they actually have a view of self that isn't real. It's a view of self that is full of pride, and that in and of itself isn't very good. That's number two. Number three, It's actually impossible as a human being to see a realistic image of self. When we punish ourselves, when we get really down on ourselves, we don't do so based on reality. Instead, we often see ourselves and punish ourselves based on a subjective perception of self and subjective, often intense feelings. So when we punish ourselves with a degree of guilt. And where does that guilt come from? Does it come from our school of love? Does it come from another person? Does it come from an inner voice within us that tells us we have to be perfect or we have to be whatever? No. We rarely punish ourselves based on a reality. Instead, we often see ourselves and punish ourselves based on subjective things. And this, by the way, this is one of the most compelling human reasons as to why confession is so important. The idea that you can see yourself with enough clarity to identify your own faults and dole out proper penance, it is outlandish. It is outlandish. What I can see in you, I can see in you with way more clarity than I can see in myself. When I'm working with people one-on-one, they'll be like, oh, wow, I never saw that about myself. Or I never realized that about myself. You're so good at identifying these things. You must not have any of these challenges. And I'm like, of course I have these challenges. Being able to see it in you is way easier than being able to see it in myself. So we don't see a realistic image of ourselves. And because we don't see a realistic image of ourselves, we should place punishment, we should place penance in the hands of other people. Let good, holy guides explain to us truly the state of where we're at and what we need to do to overcome it. So instead of being harsh on yourself, aim for a quiet, firm displeasure of improper action or thought. Aim for a quiet, firm displeasure for improper action or thought for the purpose of fueling repentance and sparking gratitude for God's mercy. So one of the ways you can work backwards and realize if you're being properly difficult on yourself or properly managing oneself is by looking to see if you have good energy fueling you toward conversion and change, as well as gratitude for God's mercy. When I know I'm right in this area, when I know I'm right with God in this area, I am almost always overcome with emotion when I go into a church because I'm like, God, you're still here. Like you're still here. You're still showing up for me. You still want to be here with me. You still want to commune with me after all this has happened. It's amazing. And I want to get better. Your mercy fuels me wanting to get better. So instead of being harsh on ourselves, aim for a quiet, firm displeasure for the purpose of fueling repentance and for experiencing gratitude for God's mercy. Another way of looking at this, and this is a good way to look at from a psychological perspective, is when you do something you wish you didn't do, when you do something you know is wrong, or when you're struggling with a habitual self-destructive pattern in your life, think about trying to parent the part of you that keeps doing the thing you don't want to do. Because when you think about parenting it, what often emerges is the type of parent that you want to be. So tender parenting is what gets results in the long term. Harsh, aggressive, loud parenting can get results in the short term, right? You're going to do the right thing for the next 24 hours if you beat yourself up and are really hard on yourself. But in the long run, what gets the best parenting results is tender parenting. It's loving parenting. It's patient parenting. It's guiding and nurturing and fostering a good and loving relationship with that part of you. So the objective isn't to berate and punish and make that part of us that keeps being self-destructive feel small, to make that part be like, I wish I could kick you out of my internal family. No. What you want to do, if you want long-term success and long-term freedom, is to treat that part with tenderness. So today's wisdom actually comes from the great book, Introduction to the Devout Life, and it comes today on the feast day of the great St. Francis de Sales. If you want to read more about great insights like this on how being hard on yourself is unholy and unproductive, pick up that book, one of the amazing, amazing great books in our church's history to get fueled up on great wisdom. Until next time, may God bless you, and remember, you were made to do hard things.